Hello and welcome. Harrison Ford is one of the very few actors to create iconic, recurring characters across three different film genres. From Han Solo in Star Wars films to Indiana Jones and CIA agent Jack Ryan. In cinema success terms, total box office for all of Harrison's films exceeds $6.2 billion. But perhaps what was equally impressive was his ability to step out of the shadow of those established star vehicles to create commanding original characters. One of those was as police detective John Book, forced to protect a young Amish boy who's seen a murder in the Peter Weir directed film Witness. Harrison was nominated for a Best Actor Oscar for his performance, while the film won 2 Academy Awards for Best Screenplay and Editing. I sat down with Harrison when he visited Australia for the original launch of the film, for a very low-key, laid-back chat that included the story behind his casting as Han Solo and his police research for the witness role.
The script itself, the screenwriters had done considerable amount of research, and it showed. I think they got very close to the truth of the Amish, albeit that in the context of the film, I mean, our interest in the Amish was not really so much to represent the Amish in an honest and truthful way, although I think we did represent them. We did justice to them, but the story is not really about the Amish, but about the conflict between the Amish and who the Amish refer to as the English. Peter did quite a bit of research. Kelly McGillis did quite a bit of research. The authors of the screenplay did a lot of research. I myself did very little to acquaint myself with the Amish, because the character was meant to be largely ignorant of the Amish, and I wanted to preserve as much as possible the reality of that.
I didn't mean so much the pre-shooting research. I meant perhaps while you were shooting the film, did you come in contact with Amish people?
We had a couple of lapsed Amish people who were advisors to us, people who had been members of the church and for one reason or another had fallen away or come out of the church. And they were our main touchstone with the Amish. The Amish themselves had no interest in
providing
communicating with us at all, since one of their basic tenets is to stay separate from the world that we represent. And I certainly respected that attitude. The only contact I had with the Amish, when we were filming, I lived about a mile from, I took a house about a mile from where we were filming the farm scenes. And I was there about a week early, and each day I'd go for a long walk out in the countryside, and I would see the same Amish. And it was the first time I would pass, there'd be nothing more than a nod in their direction, possibly a half a nod back. But on the second day, the nod went to a bit of a wave, and the wave was returned on the third day. It progressed to a comment on the weather. So they were not unfriendly, but they do maintain their separateness, so I had very little real relationship to them.
But in fact, you did go and do quite a bit of research on the police side, but in fact, I think went out on a couple of
I spent
routine sort of exercises with them.
Well, there may be a routine for them. They were certainly not for me. But in fact, I learned more from the routine, sort of situations with the police than I did from those more exciting situations. I spent about 2 weeks with very valuable to me.
Oh no, I was just going to ask that they didn't feel you were perhaps intruding a little bit. Here comes another one of those movie stars who's going to possibly misrepresent us.
In fact, I found them well, there was an initial period of wariness and wanting to know what it is that I was about, and they didn't know me, of course, except for my films, and I didn't know them except for movies and television. So we started out rather evenly, but I found them to be very generous finally in their willingness to open up to me, and they were very, very helpful. But as I was saying, I think more valuable to me was the time spent chatting over a cup of coffee on the actual police raid. Although
So you actually did go on police raid? Was that?
two times I went with them on what you might call raids. Once they were serving a warrant, they were attempting to capture a person who had been accused of murder and who had escaped. And so that was a kick down the doors kind of raid. Everyone with bulletproof vests.
Including you?
Yes, I was given a bulletproof vest.
They'd have to, I guess. I couldn't risk, nor could you for that matter.
I had no interest in risking my life for research. But
Where did they let you get close, or did you have to stay in
I
a
was
car?
no, it's
Uniformed?
in the door with them. Oh no, but they were in plain clothes themselves. There were some uniformed policemen, but I was well taken care of. They looked after me very well, and they had a sense of my. They had a sense that I knew enough to keep myself out of trouble. By that time, I'd been with them for a week or so, and in that case, they captured the guy. It was very quick, something like that. But there was great value from the experience. And the second one was much like the first. But
Like again, a raid
a raid.
where you went out bulletproof vest and so on.
Yes.
And again, accompanied them
Yeah.
into through a door and
Yeah.
into the action.
Yeah.
And isn't that pushing the risk taking for research a little too close to the edge?
Well, I thought not at the time. In fact, what I think was probably the most dangerous situation occurred one night when we'd been out to dinner and had a few drinks and decided on the way back to the hotel to stop at a rather seedy bar. My friend Gene Dooley, and I went into a bar where it was rare to see a white man, and certainly any white person with a jacket and tie on. And Dooley's a big, bulky guy. It was clear to everybody in the bar that we were a couple of cops. I mean, that was the only time that I was really aware of. I was more aware of being in danger then than any other point, because it was, as Dooley characterized the place, as a very evil place. Not because the people inside were black, but because it was a known hangout for criminals. And I thought later that, in fact, what was very funny And I stood there for a few minutes until he appeared over my shoulder, walking around King's Road. But as I stood there for a few minutes, I knew that if I didn't make some positive gesture, I would have to turn around and walk out. So I strolled through the bar in exactly the same manner that you see in the film. And when I got to the other end of the room, I realized that I had nothing to do except I saw that there was a men's room there. So I walked to the men's room door, opened it, looked inside, and there were two guys in the men's room who quickly flushed the toilet and turned around and looked at me. I looked at them, gave them as level a gaze as I could muster, and turned around and walked back out, as if I were looking for someone. Well, the feelings that I had, the play of emotion during that whole situation, I think was very valuable to me later.
Did anybody recognise you?
Not at all.
Outside the police?
Not at all.
No.
Well, not in that situation. Later. Actually went from there to another bar, which had changed clientele and had kind of college crowd right there. But I was treated exactly, and their impression was that I was a policeman.
Although they figured out who you were.
No, I mean in the first place.
Oh, in the first place.
Yeah. They treated me exactly as if I were a policeman. In fact, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey man, what are you looking for?" And kind of pressed the body very close to me. And I really learned a lot from it. But as well as that experience, just sitting around and having coffee with the guys the morning of the raid, meeting up, riding out the car to the raid, it was all very valuable.
Yes, I can imagine. Do you...
It's very important to have particular knowledge, not to operate on generalities, I think.
No, I think I was quite fascinated when I just saw a reference in one of the articles that's been published out here. That's why I was pursuing.
Well, I would never actually have mentioned it because I think it is perhaps it was a little silly. Actually, some newspaper found out about the fact that I'd been out with him, where I never would have brought it up. I prefer not to have mentioned it.
I think it lends, the credibility of the role and the performance. So it lends a lot to it. Tell me, can I just go back a little bit? Did it ever occur to you in those years before, say before Star Wars, I suppose, that you weren't going to make it quite the way you perhaps hoped you would as an actor?
Well, the only ambition I had as an actor was to find regular work. And in fact, I never really thought that I would. I never had any more ambition than to have regular work, and I really didn't imagine films. It seemed to me that I would probably, if I were going to get regular work, I would find it in television. And that was really the limit of my ambition. So I wasn't, and I also knew at the time, because I came out to California so young, and so inexperienced, that it would take me a certain amount of time before I make it. And I quickly saw, just by observation, realized that those people that stuck it out, that hung in, were the ones who finally, simply by the process of attrition, got the work.
But it was, if you go back to those earlier days, particularly the early 70s, there were people who sort of seemed to spring ahead faster than you. Did you ever have that kind of feeling that maybe things were passing you by?
No, I certainly was occasionally discouraged by not getting some part that I was interested in. And close to anger in rejection. It certainly was discouraged on occasion, angry on occasion. I've always been pretty tenacious.
Do you mean tenacious in the sense of that you're ambitious to succeed ultimately?
No. Well, not ambitious to succeed, but I've never thought of myself very much as ambitious. Determined. Determined to get what I was after. But I thought it might take me 10 or 15 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And you obviously...
And it did.
Yeah. So, and when you accept that in your own mind, whatever it happens to be, you tend not to be quite so panic-stricken and therefore and sort of rush things.
No, I think I said, but I mean, I was also immature at that moment.
You're talking now of the early 70s.
I'm talking about the late 60s, 20 years of age, when I was 21, 22 when I first came out. And I mean, the well-known story of the guy who told me that I acted more like a bellboy than a movie star. That sort of thing made me angry. It's understandable, but it didn't make much more of an impression than that.
Were you slightly crushed by the Hollywood system? I mean, I don't mean crushed physically in terms of wanting to turn away, but did it disappoint?
No, I realized. Yeah, well, I realized. I mean, their first when I was under contract to Columbia, their inclination was to remold me in the form of some other person that had been successful, to remove what was individual about me, to make me more useful, they thought, to make me something more generically correct. And the one thing I did know was that what was individual, particular about a person, was what was finally interesting. And if one could learn how to take what was individual and unique about oneself and to use that in a storytelling way, rather than just use that in the context of helping to tell a story. That was finally what was useful.
Yeah. So hand me a copy there for a while. I'll just tell you, I don't know whether the message got through to you. Probably would. I just thought I'd...
No, I had no idea.
Just to give you the background of it. Yeah. So just moving up a bit, I suppose, is it fair to describe the Star Wars break as the break sort of catapulted you sort of up out of
obscurity?
Yeah, well, not obscurity. I mean, from the professional situation that you were in, where you were perhaps doing a movie every year or 2 years.
Sure,
or whatever.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously it was a very important stage.
Yeah, but I just wondered whether or not you felt that perhaps that was overplayed, or people.
Oh, not at all.
No.
I mean, the success of Star Wars was a phenomenal success.
Right.
The film itself, and it enabled me to take advantage of that success, and immediately it opened doors that were never open for me before.
Absolutely.
And suddenly I was a viable leading man, if you will. So I'm very aware of
No, I just wanted to clarify that because I was just curious about the real story. I mean, I've heard and read a couple of versions about how you got cast. That you were in fact intended to be working at night, doing some work for George Lucas, or in his office.
I was working, in fact, for Coppola.
For Coppola.
On a project that his art director, Gene Tavolaris, was a friend of mine, to their offices, which had been made in a mill, in a shop. I needed someone to install it. And, because it was in Francis's office, and I was had worked for Francis before, and I said that I would help Dean out. He was in a bind and needed somebody to do it. I said, I'll do it for you, but I won't do it during the day. I don't want to be standing around, in a filmmaker's office in my carpentry gear. I was aware of, I was uncomfortable with enough with the fact that I was, my career was not progressing to feel a certain discomfort about it. But I'm not embarrassed about being a carpenter, but in that context, it was
absolutely, sure.
It was I didn't want to. In fact, I just didn't want to meet Francis under those circumstances.
I mean, it's just a shrewd, if nothing else, it'd be a shrewd and almost necessary approach to take. To not
just want to separate the two characters in their minds.
But then you did eventually start.
Well, in fact,
didn't you?
No, what happened was that Lucas was using the offices for interviews for Star Wars, and I had not been asked to participate in those readings, and didn't feel bad about it. It just was a fact. I had
who's
asked
to know
to do that, and I didn't even know what the film was about or what the parts were. And in fact, there was some pressure of time on getting this door installed, so I was finishing up during the day against my better judgment. George came walking through, and Richard Dreyfuss, and we all had a bit of a chat. We worked together, the three of us, on American Graffiti. Richard was there for an interview, and I suppose there was a lucky coincidence that I was there. It reminded George of my existence. But I was asked several weeks later then to read the part for him. And then I was asked if I would help them by reading with the other actors that they were testing for the part that Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher finally better. So I spent 3 or 4 days with them, reading with all the other times, without any, at that point, without any idea whether or not I had the part.
Not even an inkling.
Well, I mean, I suspected that they were either inclined towards me or a bunch of vicious bastards. So
torturing you.
Yeah, torturing me. So I mean, I did suspect that I had a bit of a leg up on it.
And it just evolved out of that. His invitation for you to just come and help out and start reading.
Well, he had read me for the part. I think he wouldn't have allowed me to
continue.
He not allowed me. He wouldn't have asked me to read these other people if I had been somewhat appropriate for the circumstances.
So, but how did you actually know that you did have a part of it? Did he just casually mention it to you at some point, or did he call you, or?
I called my agent. Began to negotiate. George was looking for an ensemble.
Yes.
Looking for 3 people that worked well together, and so I think when he saw, I suspect that I was appropriate for the part. He was looking for other people that would work with me. Although mine wasn't the most important character, he was looking for an ensemble. I think the story goes that he had 3 other actors.
Christopher Walken and some playboy guys.
So you know the story as well as I do.
Well, yeah, but
you probably know it better. I don't know any more than you do about whether it's correct or not.
So
because
eventually,
I've never discussed it with George. But eventually, the three that it was we three.
Are you a fatalist at all? Would you sort of, if you, in other words, have the attitude that so long as you keep working on that something will happen, that eventually fate will take care of the efforts and time and whatever talent you're putting into whatever you do?
Well, since I just have, I think I have what you might call a workman-like attitude about it. I'm just there to do a job, and I'm always aware of the fact that there's more to learn about how to do the job, and experience is the great teacher. And as I said, I knew that it would take some time, so I was not a particular rush. And I never thought about being a movie star. I just thought about getting regular work. I wouldn't necessarily describe that as fatalism. Or know exactly how to describe it. It's just,
when do you think you were convinced in your own mind that you were an actor and that you could make it as an actor? Forget the star bit or anything like that.
I think the first time I really felt that I understood the process of film acting, that I understood how personally to go about doing the job, was in American Graffiti. But that doesn't mean that I felt that I knew well enough how to do it.
But you reached a point in your own mind.
I'd reached a point where I felt comfortable on the set and comfortable with the process.
Tell me something. Do you resent at all, or get a little angry now to see suddenly critics are saying as if they've only just discovered it, perhaps they have only just discovered it, that Harrison Ford can act, and as a result of your performance in Witness?
I find it. I don't get angry about it, but I find it curious. I think I understand it, but it does seem. It seems a strange reaction. Maybe what they mean is I suppose. It doesn't make me angry. Not angry. It surprises me that they have so little understanding of the process, that they don't understand that. What's curious to me is that they don't recognize that what I was doing before was something appropriate to the film that I was doing. I thought. That's my judgment. That's my feeling, and I certainly understand people who might want to disagree with me. But to suddenly say, you never thought he could act before, so it's curious to me. And it seems that they might not have done their homework either. Besides the Star Wars films and the Indiana Jones films, there are quite a few other films that one should
could have a look at to know,
or to I mean, they might finally say that I'm a bad actor, and that's their judgment. But it seems unlikely. It seems irresponsible not to take into account some of that other work.
No, I think partly it's because it hasn't happened here yet. I'm sure some of the reviews will make that observation. It's been in some of the reviews that I've seen over there.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably
quite a few.
Because they see, and to one degree they're probably correct that Star Wars characters and Indiana Jones characters are, in a sense, comic strip characters, if you like. I mean, the genre is perhaps comic strip, but they've not gone beyond that to see that you've got to make those characters believable. I mean, just like Chris Reeve did with Superman.
It seems a curious kind of intellectual construction to not understand it. It seems you have to work pretty hard not to understand what acting is and what determined to make that, to take that attitude.
Yeah, or fail to make the connection. One witness with the creation of the character, how much of its involvement was work between you and Peter, and how much of it was purely your involvement of it from the research that you've done and working with the script and so on?
Well, it's all between me and Peter. I mean,
but did Peter let you just go ahead and create the character, or did he sort of nudge you a little bit in certain areas that way and perhaps back this way?
Well, I mean, yes and no. The work, the relationship is seamless. I work with what I have, a mind and a body that I have, and the idea is to tell a story between the two of us. We do the job. I'm unaware of what's me and what's Peter. We're together. But I don't remember any particular discussion of how to make the character work. A lot of discussion about how to make a scene in particular work. But the character, I think we both understood. We both knew who the character was from the very beginning, and that there was no problem.
We have we get the satellite rights to the Today program with Gene Charlotte and Jane Paulins, and I think it's Gene interviewed you.
I've never met him.
No?
For this film?
Yeah.
I think that might have been that's a Today show.
Yeah. Until I saw this, it never would have rung a bell with me, but the This Is Great Coffee. Really good. I gathered that Peter, obviously, being an Australian, wasn't going to know anything about that at all.
No, he didn't know what the commercial was, but he knew what the moment meant.
Yeah.
And he knew that it was appropriate to those circumstances, that it enforced the idea of the difference between these people.
It's a sort of alien character. Yeah. What can you just? What I just want to.
And we thought it was an appropriate moment for some humor in the film. So.
And also, the other one I think you had some input into was the barn scene with the car, the music.
I tell you frankly that I don't remember what was in the script, where the ideas came from anywhere. And I'm not either being coy or anything. I honestly don't remember. It's so the situation is always so intense and so complicated. It's very difficult to remember where any particular thing comes from, and also finally unimportant where something comes from.
I guess so.
Because it's whether or not it works, and nothing in a film is the work of any one person. It's a collaborative team effort.
I asked you that because I think there's a reference made to it in the BNBC stuff, but also because I just like the scene very much. I just thought it was just captured.
I think we talked about the music for a long time, and I think it was my suggestion to use that tune.
Right.
But any other tune might have worked as well. We've seen that's important in the tunes.
You're now in an enviable position, obviously, for many reasons, with options that you could, for instance, stop acting and produce, or if you wanted to direct, or continue acting and perhaps do all three. Do you have any inclinations in any direction at all?
No. I'm really only interested in acting, directing. script to have a particular reference to them. I think I certainly would like to work with the script of hers, but I've avoided the possibility of having anything written for me on frequent occasions when it has been suggested, because I like to see something that has a life of its own, a strength of its own, that works on its own. I'd rather do a part that was written for somebody else in mind, because it would be so much more unexpected.
You mentioned this morning at the press conference there will be another Indiana Jones. How far off is that in terms of going into production?
I really don't know. I suspect a year. Stephen has a couple of other things to do first.
Several, in fact. Harrison, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Harrison turns 80 next month on July 13, 2022, and he's still working, with Indiana Jones 5 due for release next year. In 2020 he appeared in The Call of the Wild, and the previous year in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker.